The most made questions on Google regarding the violin world, our trade, cello, double bass, and all that. Stay tuned and I will try to answer them. Let's see if I'm good in doing this. Hello, back again. This is Edgar from Cremona, Italy. Violin making. This is my world from very early in the morning up to late at night. That's my business. And you make me a question and I have an answer. First question here. Why violin is the hardest instrument? And immediately I see another question, and there is already the answer of the other question inside. Why the violin doesn't have frets? We have to go back 14th, 15th century, no violin yet around in the 14th, 13th century, only lutes, and lutes had a neck and some gut around, which were actually the frets at that time for these picked instruments. And the violin has been invented out of a certain dynamic of culture where more and more people wanted to listen to the instrument, so they had to increase the sound. And because out of this evolution, the neck came from the Baroque instruments like lutes and viola d'amore and things like this, and they had these frets on the neck. So the violin actually should also have some frets, this Baroque style, but at a certain point it was seen that you don't actually need them, you can also play without it if you put the finger on the right position. Why violin sound sad? This is very interesting. For some, a good instrument should be able to make a sad sound, a happy sound, a sparkling sound, a tranquilizing sound, a funky sound. So it really depends on the musician, what kind of sound they want to make with that violin. Very economic instruments have just one sound. You put the bow and it sounds like that. And the more you grade up in the quality, the more the instrument can make different sounds, which is created by the musician with the bow and the technique he's playing. Then he can create a different sound. Violin sounds scratchy just because an economic instrument makes just one sound, most of the time very sharp and very, we say here, like a cat under a chainsaw. It's more a question that you have to put the bow on the string, and if you make your first trial, then certainly it's very scratchy. Why violin is expensive? It's a nice question, but it's a little bit like why car is expensive. There are cars which cost very little and some who are extremely expensive. And the same thing with violins. There are tons and thousands and millions of violins around the world. Most of the instruments are very economic ones, and only a specific range of instruments, when you want to grade up and you want to reach in a certain level of sound, then it becomes expensive. And the reason it is expensive for this instrument is because we're talking about time of human beings who dedicate their life to make these instruments in the best way possible, just like we do here in Cremona. Why ViolinMaker is important? Because if you bring the violin next door to your carpenter, he's probably looking at it and he doesn't even know how important is every single detail. But if you just move the sound post or the bridge or the string or something just a tiny little bit, it changes already the whole outcome, the whole resulting sound, what it makes. So it's a very delicate construction which has to be set up in a specific way. Is the violin a percussion instrument? You would immediately say no, because we certainly divide instruments in picked string instruments and bowed string instruments, and then under percussion instruments we certainly have bongos, drums, snares and all that. But of course on a violin you can also use it by tapping, by pushing, by slapping, whatever. Contemporary music played on both string instruments is very interesting to see what they do. Everything is possible, but it's not in the category percussion instrument. Is violin similar to guitar? Is a typical Google question that you can tell that this is people who have no idea at all. Of course, they both have strings on, but the way how they are made is completely different. The guitar is all flat areas, and then the strings are kept on the bridge, which is glued on the top. On the violin, it's exactly the opposite. Is violin Italian? That's the question, you know. Of course, you talk to a German and they say it's born in Germany. You talk to somebody from Austria, they say it's born in Austria. I think it's useless to search for this person who invented the violin. I would say don't end up to try now to find a solution. The instrument has been born out of the culture in Europe slowly, and so one put it one thing, one another. At the time, no internet, no electricity, no nothing, and things popped out slowly. Out of all the other instruments existing, then came out the violin. Is violin making hard to learn? That's a good question. Yes and no. It really depends on person. We just were talking yesterday about somebody who made 2 or 3 years of the violin making school and then quit and sold everything and even burned his first instrument. We don't know if he made that instrument or was a different instrument, but there was a video going around here that he burned even an instrument. So he definitely has concluded his career as a violin making. Violin making, it's something you have to feel inside that it is something you like. You like to work with your hands, you like to work with wood. You have to be also interested in music, every kind of music. But I also know some violin makers who don't even listen to classical music at all, and they just came into it from a completely different approach. But it's not that you learn it quick. It's more a mental ability that you have to cool down and just do it every day, and then you see yourself how you slowly increase. Does violin rosin go bad? At that point I have to tell you what is the rosin for. The rosin you put on the bow, on the hair, in order that the hair becomes sticky, and then when the bow reaches the strings, then there's a certain friction, and that makes actually the sound. Now the rosin comes from the trees, and these are cooked and made in a specific way, and you have rosin and rosins. The more the instrument is bigger, like the cello or the double bass, it's a very soft one. On the violin we use a rather hard one. Oops, these are my rosins, for instance. I make them with my name on it, and you have them in octagonal, and this is here for a violin. And then we have here, this comes from my heart, just for you, heart shape. And it's again this rosin. For cello, we have it as well. It's slightly different. The recipe is actually the recipe from Lanaro. Lanaro was a violin maker from Padua. The rosin actually doesn't go bad, but if you are very picky on the sound, then a fresh made rosin is a little bit more sticky, and it could be that if you're in this certain very high level, you can immediately the difference if it's too old. If you are from South Korea, but even Japan and China, whatever, you have the ability to go quick to Seoul. On Sachodong, Sachodong, that's Sachodong. That's the area. Sachodong is the area where all the violin makers are. And there is now a new shop of a good friend of Min, especially, Yoon Ayong. And she opened her small shop. She called it Anima del Violino, for Koreans. Impossible, just like me, Sachodong. But this is a nice shop. And we will go to have more and more of our instruments, at least the Linea Macchi and the Scala Perfetta, that at least if you cannot afford to come to Italy, you can go to her shop, to Ayong. Of course, beside of her master instruments, which she's building there in her workshop, she also now starts to sell our instruments or to show them. We have them just there, and so it's the ability to make it easier for people from South Korea. Does violin hurt your fingers? Yes, of course. If you're not used to it, even if you play the guitar, then you get hurting and bloody fingers. And same with the violin. Does violin hurt dogs' ears? This is a good question. It depends from dog to dog. Some dogs don't like it because of the frequencies, so then they start also to sing. We here in the workshop have Isotta, and Isotta doesn't care at all. She's just there, and she's used to it. How violin works is very interesting, very complex. You need a bow, rosin on the hair. You stroke the bow on the strings. The string is taken, starts to vibrate, and makes a vibration. This vibration over the upper nut, the bridge, goes to the top, Underneath the top, we have a sound post on the side of the treble side. The higher frequencies are amplified on the back, the deeper ones on the top. And this whole machinery makes it that it starts to be amplified without electricity or anything, only on specific frequencies, and that makes it that it becomes a violin sounding instrument. How violins are made? Watch all the videos on my channel, and after that you get a better idea. Why a violin is so expensive? Not all instruments are so expensive, but some instruments are very expensive because who made it, when they made it, and if this maker is well known. That's all about. You buy the name, and because he's well named, he very likely knows exactly what he does, and that's that the outcome is very good, and that's what people actually search. This takes a lifetime to reach that point, and since human beings' time is the most expensive item here on planet Earth, this is the reason that instruments, violins are so expensive, and there are no machineries who can pop out the best sounding instruments. What are violin strings made of? Good question. It all started that it was gut, then gut with some silver around, some metal around rounding. Then they started to have the highest string, the E string, only in metal. Then they started to put some nylon. We are talking about 50, 60 years ago. And right now we are in a high-tech production of strings, and we have new strings which have used from titanium, Kevlar, carbon fiber, and it still continues. What violin plays Hilary Hahn? A copy of the Guarnieri Canone made by Jean-Baptiste Villon, very important and famous French maker. Why Paganini is considered the devil violinist? A little bit because his appearance rather thin and his nose, long hair, and then especially because he had extremely long fingers. What violin should I buy? That's a good question, because thrown like this into the universe is a good question, and if you ask it into the universe, this shows me already that you're very likely a beginner, and then I would just say try to find a violin which responds very quick and easy, and already with a few tones you have this impression, wow, this one sounds good, that's the right violin at that moment for you. What violin size should I get? That's a good question. I'm a violin maker, but actually there is all a question about these fingers and the arm and your body size. So the violin teacher, he's actually the right person who looks at you and says, I've got it, you need a half size, a 3/4, a 7/8 or whatever. Most cellists believe that they need to play on a full-size cello, but indeed most adult people actually would be better served with a 7/8 cello than with a full size. It really is a huge difference in comfort, and it makes playing so much easier and more comfortable. What violin is the best? Of course, the one I made. It's so personal, it depends so much on every single person, and nobody talks about it. What bow you are used to play, what kind of music you make. So it really is very personal. One instrument in the hands of one might sound very well, and in the hands of somebody else completely different. At a certain level, it's very personal, and you should not be conditioned by others around. You are the one, you have to take it, and you have to decide what is the one fits best to you. What is a violin wood? Sounds somehow strange. Well, the violin wood, violins don't grow, is true, but the pieces of the violin are cut in a different way. So from the very beginning, when people cut a tree, they decide, let's cut it in a way that people can make violins out of this wood, out of this maple, out of this spruce. And that's why we call it violin wood, and tone wood dealers are selling this wood already cut in the right way. What to clean the violin with? Of course, there are a lot of products, special rags, microfiber, and I have them in my online shop and they work great. But actually, you don't need anything of all that, just a rag, even a cotton, whatever. But reality is that most people don't clean it right away, and then it sticks too much on it, and then you need something to take it off. In that case, then a cleaner with some oil, wax, things like this help, and then also the nice microfiber rag helps to clean it profound. In my online shop, you see, of course, the Edgar's Gentle Instrument Cleaner. That's just the right thing. And in the set, there's also the microfiber cloth. Why so many viola jokes? Good question. Probably because this lower tuning makes the instrument itself less a soloist instrument, so they always had it on the side. Yeah, they don't need to play so precise. In the last years, let's say 20, 30 years, a lot has been increased sound-wise, especially on the viola, and the viola is everything else than now an instrument you don't hear. I hope you like this one. See you soon. Tell your friends. Bye-bye.